Hello and welcome to this edition of Eyes Wide Open. And in this session we're going to be looking at suffering in particular. We can, if we have the opportunity, widen it out a bit further to look at nature and nurture debates. And finally, I'm going to hope that we can find some hope in the midst of a world of suffering. And this, of course, is being recorded on the day when in Venezuela there has been an earthquake. And I can imagine there is a great deal of suffering in that country right now. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my friend and guest, Rob Turl. Rob, if you'd like to say a few words to the listeners and viewers of this podcast.
Thanks, Jeff. It's always a pleasure to speak with you. My name's Rob. I'm a pastor here at the church that we're actually filming this in Hull, Christchurch Orchard Park. I'm married to Emma. I've got two little boys as well.
Well, I think there's much more to Rob than that. He has been a pastor here in this church for 5 years. It has grown exponentially over that time. We have a diverse range of activities that the church undertakes, and they're all done by the guidance and inspiration and leadership of Rob. He's well known and well respected in the community here on Orchard Park. So it is with great pleasure that I once again have the opportunity to pick his brains. And so let's get started. Rob. So I'm just going to dive straight in, and I don't want no pat answers. Why do we suffer?
It's a very good question. Probably, in some senses, the hardest question. In some senses, not a hard question for a Christian to answer. In some senses, the hardest question because it comes with emotion, it comes with reality. People asking that question are often asking it from a point of view of, I have suffered, it hurts, I don't know why I'm suffering, I don't know what life is. It's an existential crisis moment. What is going on with my life? So it's a really important question that we tackle. And before I say anything about suffering, I don't think there are loads of easy answers to the question of suffering. But what I think the Christian story does is I think it puts a framework to the question of suffering. It gives us an ending that is better than any other worldview ideology could ever possibly give you. It gives you something of a solution in the middle, but it also begins by telling you something of where suffering comes from. So I could talk a little bit about that if you wanted to.
Okay. Well, we'll have time to dive into these things. Now, there's a verse in the Bible which deeply troubles me, and I'm going to read it to you. And I'd like some help in understanding, if you can give me some, on this. Okay. It's from Jeremiah 32, verse 18. And it says here, I read it, find it. I've got my glasses on when I need them. You show love to thousands, but bring the punishment for the parents' sins into the laps of their children after them. Great and mighty God, whose name is the Lord Almighty. So there is something in there that bothers me. The sins of the father visited on the children, which seems highly unfair. They haven't done anything wrong. Which also now brings me to the story of Job. And so we'll go back to this in a minute. I just want to try and link these together. So Job, in the Bible, is considered by God a truly righteous man. And by extension, his family are, because he prays for them. Job prays for them. So in case they have done anything wrong, Satan comes to God and says, he's only good. He's only blessing you because you've blessed him. Take away all of that, and let's see what's left. And not long after that, when Satan departs, his children are all killed. I mean, that is the second act. His children are now killed. I don't understand that, and I'm sure they, in the midst of that moment, couldn't have understood it either. What is God trying to show us? Or rather, if that's not even quite the question, what can we learn from such an experience? What can we learn from that passage?
Yeah.
What does it teach us?
Yeah, that's good. And I think it was it Stephen Fry who said that God was mean, capricious, nasty, because Stephen Fry would say God is the ultimate source of all suffering. I guess that's what he would say. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he's attributing it to God. And in some senses, Stephen Fry helps the Christian in a sense because he doesn't let us get off the hook. The picture I think the Bible paints of God is not a God who creates a world and then runs off to look after some other planet somewhere else in the universe. I think the picture that we have of God in the Bible is of a God who creates a good world and who cares intimately about it. Sometimes so much so that as a just God, he will punish sin in the world because he's not going to let that go. And so there's various points in Scripture that talk about the fact that we're punished for our own sins, not for anyone else's. Of course, if we continue generationally in the sins of our forefathers, then God will potentially deal justly.
Is that what
with
you
each
think
generation.
Jeremiah is saying?
Yeah, I think so. I think when you read the Scriptures, you see in Ezekiel, for example, we're told that we'll be punished for our sins. I think though what does happen is people do continue in the same patterns that we've always continued in since the beginning. And when I said the beginning of the story tells you something of where suffering comes from, ultimately what you have in the Bible, it makes wonderful sense of the world actually in many senses. A God who makes a good world, a God who makes human beings in his image. So the reason why we just know that we have value and dignity, the reason why we know suffering matters, the reason why it's a problem to us is because we know we're more than just atoms. We're more than just a random chance of random things colliding in the universe and suddenly you get Jeff and you get Rob. We know that we're more than that. And people suffering know that they're more than that they are, in some senses, valuable because, and the reason for that is because they're made in the image of God fearfully and wonderfully, the Bible says. But here's what humans do. We vote for independence. We're created to kind of be dependent on this God who makes us in his image. But what do the world over? We vote for independence from that God. The constitution of creation that says, hey, this could be a world where God and man live in harmony, and man live in harmony, and we live in harmony with ourselves, because that's often where suffering sits internally. We live in harmony with creation. Well, human beings kind of ripped up that constitution. Right. We continue to rip it up, and that is the root cause of sin, according to the Bible.
Just going back slightly, the idea of the generation's sin. Mm-hmm. So that would almost suggest learnt behaviour, that you're just following the example that has been set by your father, and then you yourself reflect that in your behaviour, which is reflected then in your children, because that's what they see. And so is that what is being suggested here, that sin, or all right, we will call it sin, I would like to call it deviant behaviour in our modern world, but I'm quite happy with the word sin. Does that suggest that it is learnt, that we are programmed in some way? We have to deprogram ourselves. Mm-hmm. Is that what that is almost suggesting? If we want to break that cycle, do we have to deprogram ourselves from that setting of we would just repeat the same mistakes that our parents have made to us generation after generation? And just one more bit to that, which I want to add, and then I'll let you take over. The fact that we have been discussing this for thousands of years suggests there is no simple answer. Otherwise we would, at some point, the greatest minds on earth have wrestled this. And here we are in 2026 on a sweltering hot day in June, still asking the same awkward questions and never quite satisfied with the answer we're given.
I think as a Christian, this is where we've got the top trump card. There's no immediate answer, but there is a gloriously simple answer, which I'm sure we'll come to later on. But I think, where does suffering, is it learned behaviour? What is it? And you talking about sin, let's call it sin.
Yeah.
Here's why we should call it sin. Because we need to define what evil is in the world. And I think the Bible would just call it sin. We often teach the children, shove off God, I'm in charge, no to your rules, my way, I vote for independence, let's rule the earth, humans, our way, rather than God's way. And that is a definition of evil that the Bible gives. Of course, we need a definition. But without a God, I don't think there is a really good definition of evil other than a human construct that we make up that they'll disagree with in one country, and in another culture they'll have maybe a slightly different view of it. But I think learned behaviour is, of course, a reality. There is a nurture reality to how evil expresses itself in the world. Children naturally copy their parents, but there's another thing going on as well. For me, there's a real nature thing going on here as well. We're dealing with my son at the moment, who's 5 years old, and he's well into the world of lying.
Right.
But you kind of think back and remember the first day that he told a lie, and it's in one sense funny because it's like, who are you? Like trying to rebel and like expect, like, who are you? You're just tiny, small thing. But in another sense, we didn't teach him that.
No,
we didn't take him on any courses. It was very natural to him. And I'm not shy to say that. I love my boys so much, and they are precious, and they are made in the image of God, and they are capable of such beauty and creativity and awesomeness, even now at their age. But naturally, they know how to break the rules.
Right. If you were suffering, in whatever capacity that happens to be for you, because suffering is mind, body and spirit. You know, people who are unemployed suffer. You know, they don't have to have lost an arm. They suffer. I wonder if an atheist who thinks, or someone who just follows the evolutionary story of life, what do they bring to the person that's suffering? What do you think they could bring in a world that is godless and random? Because I think in that world, suffering is an evolutionary misstep. Because if it doesn't serve a purpose for us, it has no purpose. It must have a purpose. To an atheist, an evolutionist, suffering has no purpose. So it's an evolutionary misstep, which would in itself, if Darwin is to be believed, should die out because it serves no purpose. It will be overtaken by better species that don't suffer. So for me, atheism offers nothing. It's cruel, it can't offer you anything. In your Christian view, what is the point of... I mean, I know there is suffering, and what I'm trying to get to is, what is the point to it? Now, when I look at particular verses in the Bible, I often think to myself, is God trying to train us, punish us, use a stick, as it were, to beat us into a particular form of behaviour? Does suffering serve that purpose? Because if it doesn't, if it's got no meaning, it is meaningless and cruel and random, and you might live your life and never suffer terribly, or you could be someone very unfortunate and suffer terribly. And you think, why? What have I ever done wrong?
Yeah, no, so just firstly on the whole, what does the atheist offer? I think the best that they would offer, and I know lots of atheists, is they would probably call on humanity to do their best to make the world as good as possible.
Yeah.
And my
Good luck with that one.
Well, my challenge back would be, consider the history of the world. It's the myth of progression, that the world is getting better, and that as technology advances, everything... The scary reality of technology, let's not go down this rabbit hole, but the scary reality of technology is progressing but humans are the same and will remain the same. And
Yes.
my, I guess, thing back to the atheist too, look, many atheists attempt to do many, and do many good things in the world, and do alleviate lots of suffering. But I think we are fooling ourselves if we think the answers are in humanity, ultimately. The second bit that is worth talking about is what then as a Christian is the purpose? Like, is there any meaning and purpose? And I think absolutely the Bible points to a big fat yes.
Okay.
Probably with a big fat caveat on that as well, if I can.
Okay, yeah.
The caveat being that you mentioned Job at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Job is allowed to suffer tremendously. God gives this great permission to in the story of Job to Satan to bring destruction and devastation to Job's life. And various people throughout the story of Job try and give, and this is in the Bible, this is a Bible story for people that don't know, and various people try and give solace, and various people try and give answers. And often the finger gets pointed back at Job. There must be something, God must be punishing you, Job, surely. And then you get to the last chapters of Job, and this is God's answer, effectively. Who are you to know me and my mind? And so in that sense, like, where were you when I created the world? Are you the one who holds the storehouses of snow? I know that's not the science of it, but it's picture language. Who are you? You're not doing any of that stuff. You're not sustaining the earth. And so in that sense, there is, of course, who am I to, even as a Christian, to suggest, and who is any human being to suggest they know the mind of God on any particular suffering? Well, I'm just me. But the Bible would indicate there are things that God is doing and using suffering for.
So it does have a purpose in your mind?
I think
it can have a purpose.
I think so, yeah. I think, but how can you? One of the challenges is I'm going through my head and thinking of various stories of individuals that I know who've suffered intensely, and I can't give a specific answer as to why you are suffering in the way you are and why God is allowing it. But as a Christian, of course, there's great hope in the Bible, and there's great purpose expressed, which I could talk about a bit later on.
I want to pick up on something you just said, and that's God allowing it, which I'm sure people are going to struggle with that, because some people clearly do suffer, and you can live next door to someone who doesn't suffer at all, and yet your life is hellish. And I think that's the bit that people don't get. So I suppose, is God allowing the suffering, yay or nay? We'll deal with that. Are you familiar with a book by Harold Kushner called When Bad Things Happen to Good People?
I've heard of the book, yeah. I don't think I've read it though.
I mean, basically, it's struggling with the same thing. Why do bad things, which is just the same question, why do bad things happen to good people? I have heard an argument that says they don't, because none of us is actually good. So if you've managed to get through life without suffering, consider yourself very, very, very lucky, right? Very lucky. And that argument goes back to the original sin. So that we have sinned, we fall short of the glory of God. You can expect nothing really but the consequences of those actions. But aside from that, okay, and I want to just pick up on that thing that you said, God allow, which to some people is going to jar. So is our perspective on suffering skewed? Are we looking at it the wrong way? Are we even asking the right questions? I sometimes wonder if the question, why do you suffer, even a valid one? Because I don't know that we can get to an answer that satisfies. And I mean, we could go around this all day long, you and I. We could just go around and shadow boxing all day long. I need to believe that no matter how I or others suffer, take Venezuela right now, in Caracas, that earthquake. People will be in buildings that are flattened. They're in bed asleep. What can we take, when we look at that, does it serve a good, godly purpose? Do you think it does? Do you think, I mean, it's got to be a really deep theological struggle, this. It's got to be, surely. It's not, we can't just have glib answers to these things.
Well, there are two things that frame it a little bit in terms of the theology. You're right. Of course, the Bible says we're made in the image of God, fearfully and wonderfully made. But you're right. The wrong question is, why do bad things happen to good people? Because the Bible says we've all stuck two fingers up at God. We've all rebelled against him. So our definition of good, what does that mean? Well, of course, we want to view ourselves as good people, don't we? And so that's why we put a label on us. But the Bible has a different view. The Bible says, yeah, of course you're valuable, of course you're precious, but all of us have sinned. That's the language of the Bible. So that question's wrong. The other thing that helps frame it as well is that often in the midst of suffering, our sole focus is on the temporary earthly life that we live in now.
Yeah.
And so as a Christian, what makes a huge difference to suffering, and actually what makes the biggest difference, I think, to a lot of the Christians that throughout history I've heard wonderful stories of, and people I know as well, who suffer and endure, and even to some degree flourish and thrive in the midst of devastation, is the fact that this is not it. This life is not it. And when you think it is it, then suffering is the worst.
Yes.
It's destruction. It destroys all you have.
Yes.
It takes everything you have.
So do you think
Yeah.
in the midst of suffering, it draws us closer to the heart of God? That suffering, because obviously the question will always be, why me? Why me? Why me? I mean, I've often asked it myself, so I understand most people will do it as well. Do you think one of the good things that, or perhaps a better word would be one of the more positive outpourings of this, is it draws us a little bit nearer to God? That, like Job, or like any of the people, if you think of Psalm 88, which is a litany of misery, and it ends by saying, darkness is my friend. And it's a litany of hell on earth. And it's interesting that it's in the Bible. It hasn't been excluded. It's almost blasphemous. But it's in the Bible. So what does it teach us? Does it teach us that suffering can bring us closer to the heart and will of God?
I think you've said it. I think often God does use suffering to bring us to the heart of God. Going back to the beginning, what in some senses were we made for? Harmony with God, harmony with self, with others, with the creation around us, and all of that was torn and broken apart. But often suffering and experience some deeply that tear and that crack and that brokenness is what brings us back to realise this can't be all there is. I am made for something more, and what I'm ultimately made for is a relationship with the God who made me. So in one sense, it won't satisfy anyone saying that, because why does God have to use the utter devastation that seems to happen in the earth to that end? But here's like you say, the Bible from beginning to end does not hide from suffering.
No.
It's right there all the way through. It doesn't pretend it's not real. God enters into it in the person of Jesus. But ultimately, through suffering, people often are drawn into the thing they were made for, the fellowship and relationship with God. And Corrie ten Boom, the lady who, she was with a family, a Christian who were rescuing Jews from the Nazis. And obviously, the Nazi treatment of the Jews and other people, other minorities, is one of the things we look to when we talk about suffering. But one of the things she's quoted as having said, I think she said it, was you never realise, you never learn that Christ is all you need until Christ is all you have. You never realise God is all you need until God is all you have
left.
Yeah, and
just talking on that, I went to Belsen as a young soldier back in the probably late 70s, early 80s. And it was a harrowing experience. But the one thing I always remember, it's like I only did it this morning, it's seared into my consciousness. When I first went in there, a whole group of us went. All the tank drivers they weren't needed during the live firing exercises of the tanks. So they just, on a whim, thought, yeah, I'm going to go and have a look at Belsen then, as you would on an afternoon. So anyway, we went to Belsen and we went into a reception area, and the floor, the walls and the ceiling were covered in newspapers from all around the world at that time, because it had been liberated by the British. So most of them were British papers, American papers. You couldn't understand the Russian papers, and clearly there were no German papers. And I can always remember, and it was at eye level as well, which made it even more stark. I didn't have to try and find it. There was a picture of 3 German women guards, SS guards, and they were standing shoulder to shoulder, arms around one another. Sort of a jolly summer picture. And the papers were covered with about 3/4 of an inch of perspex. And I don't know who this person would have been, but they came back, I don't know how many days it must have taken them, and they scratched the perspex until eventually they got through to the newspaper underneath. And then, having got that far, tore the head off one of those women guards. I think it was the one in the middle. And that stuck with me more than when I went out into the grounds and you see the raised pits and there's a brass plaque and it says approximately, because I don't know, they just bulldozed them in, covered them with lime, put soil on top, and that was the end of it. That image in that room, and I can still feel myself now getting slightly chilled, even as I remember how many years, more than 40 years on. I still remember that like I did it only a couple of hours ago. And I think I know that we will never get to a point where there is a satisfactory answer theologically or intellectually with suffering. I think it's something we just have to learn to live with, something we are going to experience. None of us get away from it. So I'd like to move on. I take it, I don't know if you are aware that John Locke, a famous English philosopher, who I well remember from my days at university, and all the others in that long litany of trying to work out why the world is the way it is. I'm really not even paraphrasing him, but he had the basic idea of we came into this world as a blank tablet, and through the processes of society, social mores and everything, we get shaped into who we become. And I'd like to look at now, if we can, the sort of nurture-nature debate. We'll open this up. And I know that we can pick on any number of villains from the 20th century. I mean, every one of them, they just spring into your mind immediately. But rather than go down the road of Saddam Hussein, okay, Harold Shipman, who killed off a load of old people, right? I don't quite know, even when I say that, how we even begin to unpack that one. Does that indicate, because he had the power and the knowledge, that he was corrupted by it and he had a twisted evil sense and he carried it through? As you can contrast that with somebody who goes out and stabs somebody. They don't have to be major, like world-class, world-breaking crimes. Why? I mean, I know it goes back to the same question of suffering, But is that because we are made bad, or is it because we actually are bad? And there's an awful lot of evidence in history that seems like Kerry Ten Boom. Sorry, I got her name wrong. It's
Corrie Ten Boom.
Corrie Ten Boom. There's her, and then you can flip that Saddam Hussein. Both in the same century, both at opposite ends. Explain, if you can.
If you can. I think it, again, I think there is 100% a nature issue at stake, but that doesn't negate the fact that there are 101 factors that go into making up a human being, and so why does evil express itself in such a variety of, let me say this, creative ways? Sadly, sickeningly creative ways. Because there's 101 factors that go into making up a human being, from your ideology to your psychology to sociology to where you're brought up and how you're brought up. And I think it is fair to say that all of those things go into shaping how people have, sadly and horribly, expressed evil in the world. But that doesn't mean to say there's not a root issue behind all of that.
So can I ask you, and I know the answer to the question, but other people out there won't, why haven't you killed somebody? Why haven't you? More importantly, why haven't you done that?
Yeah.
When you would have had good reason to, maybe. I certainly know in my time I've had good reason to do it, but didn't. Why?
Well, that's an interesting subject on even the reason to do things. But I would say probably I have got a catalogue that I could tell you about of issues and sins and ways in which I express that what I would say is a heart of rebellion against God. Like, I do it in all kinds of ways. But I would say probably a large factor is how I have expressed that evil.
May not have been manifested by putting a knife in someone's belly.
It's been very culturally acceptable. I wasn't as a child. I wasn't encouraged that violence is the answer. In fact, my dad was the kind of person who would get into fights, but he'd be the guy breaking it up. He'd be in the middle of it. I saw that on multiple occasions, him getting in the middle of altercation, and I've kind of carried that on. And that's nature. I'd like to attribute some of that to my Christian faith,
Yes,
but
and
I
the
can't.
imprinting of a good role model in your life.
Yeah, it goes almost further back than that. So what is natural to us is funneled in, and I would say this in terms of my Christian faith. It's worth saying this, that Jesus has a category for this, in that who was Jesus most angry with in terms of people in the world who would bring suffering on others? Well, he didn't let the tax collector get off the hook. The corrupt tax collector who was robbing off his own people and supporting the Romans, a traitor to his own people. He called him what he was, a tax collector, a sinner. But Jesus' main issue, he called such people to himself, said, "Come to me, let me save you, let me change you." For whatever reason, you've gone down that road in life. Maybe it was easier for you to take that route. But Jesus targeted the people that society said were wonderful people. The upstanding, religious Pharisee who looked good on the outside, presentable. Let's get them on the TV shows. They're the celebrities of the day. They look the part. And Jesus actually said, there's an issue there. Underneath all of that beautiful looking outworking, there's an issue in your heart. And it's been expressed in ugly ways. Now, society might say it's okay, but society isn't the judge of what's right and wrong.
No.
I am, says, not me, says Jesus. I'm the doctor. Let me diagnose the problem. And so I think that's interesting, that there's a heart issue, and even Jesus goes there and says, look, it's going to be expressed differently depending on where you've come from, but it's the same issue.
Okay, moving on slightly. I know we spoke briefly earlier today, but I just want to look at an experiment that Stanley Milgram conducted at Yale University in 1961. And it's where he took 40 volunteers who were randomly... So this goes to this nature-nurture.
This is taking me back to A-level psychology.
Yeah. Yes, yeah. And anyway, he arranged them so that there were teachers and learners. And if the learner started to get it wrong, the teacher would inflict a punishment, 15 volts. And every time they got it wrong, they had to repeat phrases, they would increase the voltage by another 15 volts. And the teacher would willingly keep upping the voltage. And the person on the other side who was getting it wrong was beginning to cry out in pain. But unbeknown to the teachers, they didn't know that this wasn't actually happening, but they believed that it was, right? And I think it's 65% of the people who were the teachers, therefore the ones inflicting the pain, took it up to 450 volts. That's enough to kill you. And the subjects on the other side went silent, which meant the person who was the teacher thought, good grief, I've killed them. Right? That's one experiment. What does it say about us? And there's another one, Philip Zimbardo, who did a prison, again, the same principle. He took 24 volunteers, but they were all, had no predisposition to violence, and divided them into prison guards and prisoners. And the prisoners were actually given uniforms to look like they were prisoners, given a prison number. And the experiment was meant to run for 2 weeks. Right? It was cancelled after 6 days because the guards were sadistic. Now, they had no predispositions to violence. They weren't people that they'd dragged off the streets who were street fighters. These were people at a university, right? They did this to each other. What does that say about us? These were random people with no background, as far as anyone could tell, in violence. And yet some of the teachers in the Milgram experiment took the voltage up to 450, which kills people. And they still did it. Why? Why do you think? Or what does that say about us?
Well, the first thing to say is, for a comfortable Westerner, it's harrowing and it's frightening, because it's maybe a little bit of a reality check on humanity, and maybe people in other parts of the world would be less surprised at those kind of studies. But it actually offends us, because we like to say, I would never ever.
Exactly.
I'd never ever do that. And there was something psychologically wrong with a large percentage of people in Nazi Germany who supported the Nazis, and some of the terrible things that were going on there, and they're just a different breed, and we as the British people are just so much different. And sadly, the Bible, but also psychological experiments like that, don't allow us off the hook so easily. You like this quote, because it was a Chinese friend of mine who said, I think I've told you this before, who said that in his experience, Britain was one of the most self-righteous cultures in the world because we think we are what we are not. And I think that's not too unfair. I think we're living in an increasingly selfish culture that doesn't care about one another, and I think we probably have seen glory days and now a spiralling effect of sin. But here's what it tells you. I think it tells you that human beings have an issue at heart, and the question for anyone listening to this is, what is that? Because I think the Bible gives us the best answer. What that is I am happy to go my way. I'm happy to ignore what God says about other human beings and how they should be valued and treated. Under the right conditions, under the right pressure, I will choose me and my way over God's way, and that is a scary reality for humanity.
If you were to think about what you've just said to me about the way that we act, does anonymity, so I'm thinking here of the internet, does that bring out, I mean, there are myriad cases, stalking, grooming, fraudulent behaviour. I mean, stealing someone's life savings. If no one is looking, if there is no consequence to our behaviour, we end up in a state of nature. We end up in the Lord of the Flies situation. Do you think that we are fundamentally flawed, and without God, this is what we really are like? We put on a cloak of civility and sophistication and culture. And yet when no one is looking, when the lights are switched off, and we can get away with it in the dark, do you think we come into this world, that John Locke was wrong, that we come into this world possessed to evil?
Yeah, I think absolutely. Evil as defined by, I think, what God says is evil, which is ultimately a going our own way. Of course, there is an important caveat that, and by the way, this is a question for an atheist. Human beings are undoubtedly capable of incredible creativity and beauty, and
aren't we just?
And where does that, as this random collection of atoms, where does that come from? Is that merely just the product of evolutionary advancement, or does that come because I reflect my Creator, who is beautiful and creative? Just look at the world around us, and look at the intelligent design of the life around us. Does that come from Him? And I think the hallmarks are that we're the fingerprint, if you like, of the God who made us. So with that caveat, absolutely, in our hearts, we come into this world ready to stick two fingers up and to go, to run our own path. And that, for me, is why the world is so broken. And that, for me, is also why, if you look to humanity for your hope and your help, I think you're looking in the wrong place. I think we're going down the wrong path, because it hasn't worked for the years that this earth has been spinning and human beings have been walking on this earth. It hasn't worked.
Can I just take you back to the story of Joseph, the one sold into slavery? And I'm sure you are very well aware of that story. I don't need to go into too much detail. But at the end of it, as you well know, he became second only to Pharaoh in Egypt, became like the prime minister effectively, which does seem to suggest that in spite of an evil action, God can redeem it, and did in his life. If you think of anyone you could think of, and even if you can't, you can just create them in your imagination, someone living what I would only describe as a hellish life, and not necessarily of their own making, and not necessarily of one that they've inherited, made bad choices. Good of free will, we make bad choices, there are consequences, and maybe they've compounded and compounded and compounded. And if that person is listening to us today, listening to this podcast, and I hope you are, if they are here, the story of Jacob of redemption does seem to suggest that in spite of your circumstance, in spite of what you are going through, there is hope. Do you believe that?
100%. And I would say to the suffering person, I think all humans suffer in some way, but we're talking about the person who is acutely suffering. You are awake to the world in a way that many people are not. suffering, I think, wakes up a human being in a way that, it leads people into depression and all kinds of dark places, but I think you're awake to the reality of the world in a way that sometimes other people are a little bit more sleepy to it. And what you can then do with that is you can shake your fist at God, or you can look to God as a true hope. My wife, for those that don't know, and to know that this is not the worst suffering in the world, but she was diagnosed with a serious form of brain tumour, and we don't know where this is going to go. But where is her hope? Her hope is not ultimately in this life, but in a God who has a purpose and a life for her beyond. The purpose being to know him, to worship him, to find her life in him. Jesus said, I've come that you might have life and have it to the full. That means now. That doesn't mean to say easy, happy life, but it means life lived connected in the way we're made to be, but a life that goes on.
Yeah.
And that's what Christ came into this world to do. By the way, God then comes in flesh, in Jesus. This is why the Bible's not hiding from suffering. Into a broken, suffering world, suffers, dies for us, to take the penalty for all the evil in the world, on himself. He suffers for us. That's the kind of God we're talking about here. He comes in, unlike any other religion in the world. He comes in, suffers alongside us, takes the punishment upon himself, then rises so that we might have this rising hope in our life that there is more to come. So what you say to someone who is acutely suffering is you say, don't shake your fist at God and suffer through this life and find yourself empty at the end. But suffer, yes, in this life. Reach out to God, reach out to his salvation, reach out to the Saviour, Jesus Christ, and find in him life and hope and joy eternally forever and ever. That's the promise of the Bible. Now, is that pie in the sky? Look at the evidence. That's not what this is about. But look at the evidence, engage with the evidence of Christianity and see why even today people are turning to Christ again and finding in him, actually, this is real. This is not pie in the sky, this is real hope.
Right, Rob, I think we probably need to wrap this up, and it's been illuminating to listen to you. And I think we'll meet again, I'm sure. But for now, we'll bring this to an end. So I hope that this has helped you in some way. I hope it has been beneficial. And if it has, and you would like to know more, then you are more than welcome, and you would be openly welcomed to come to Hope Church on Orchard Park.
Christchurch Orchard Park.
Christchurch Orchard Park, where you can meet Rob, a few others, maybe me, but where you can come and learn more about what has been discussed. We've really only skated on the surface, and we've kept it bite-sized for deliberate reasons. So if you have enjoyed this, and I hope you have, and if it's touched you in some way, and I hope it does, please feel free to come to the church, Orchard Park, Christchurch Orchard Park. I must get this right, Christchurch Orchard Park, where you can meet Rob and discuss these matters further. And with that, we're going to close. And I would say, if you have watched this, and I know I'm not going to go down that road again, but please do like and subscribe. And subscribe doesn't mean you pay us any money, although you can if you want to. Like and subscribe just helps the algorithm make this podcast grow. So on that note, I'm going to say thank you for listening, and I'll see you at the next one.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Rob.